I felt a bit sorry for the Executioner, and I do hope that they decide to keep him on, because I do think that that was a really, really good showing from him, despite the fact he didn't win. One of the things it showed was just his incredible level of heart, being able to hang on. And also, he was quite resourceful. He was getting dazed quite a lot by the shots from Tahuna, who was quite accurate, though I wouldn't say it wasn't quite sort of the slug match that I thought it could have been. It had its time, but generally it was sort of more calculated than it was sort of just running roughshod with fists, so to speak. And I did notice that at least once in the first, when Joey Beltran moved from stand-up to opening up and thinking, perhaps we ought to go to the ground, and that's not just a Beltran move at all. In the second and third round, Tahuna was also going to the ground quite a bit. I noticed that the way he managed to gain sort of some time out, if you like, was to employ a sort of dirty boxing type clinch, in which at least he could, for about 2 seconds, just stop Tahuna's advance completely. And I think that worked quite well for him, and maybe that was one of the reasons that he was able to sort of hang on. Very, very... I mean, Tahuna did not finish, although, again, there were a few points when, saved by the bell, perhaps. But yeah, I kind of went for Tahuna, but I was hoping that the Executioner would win. I think it was Carmont's core strength, that actually did Vemola in. Although he was, to begin with, getting the takedowns and stuff, he couldn't finish his submissions. I'm not quite sure why, to be totally honest. Just because he seemed to have quite a lot of time to, tighten chokes here and stuff like that. The commentators were saying things about positioning, which one, like me, who doesn't, partake, doesn't really understand. But they were trying to hint that it was more to do with the positioning of Carmont, quite deliberately, that saved him from those submission attempts. I think the other thing was that several times, particularly when they were sort of... when there was a bit of a scramble, I think it was, fleetingly you'd have Vemola on the top, and then he'd sort of get sideswiped. And I think it was literally because Francis Carmont had a lot more core strength, so he sort of sideswiped him a little bit. The end was quite neat looking. It was sort of one of those skip from one position into another so quickly that the person inside doesn't know what's going on. A little bit Venus flytrap like, but to be honest, he didn't do quite as badly as I thought. And perhaps I'm wrong in thinking that, he could have actually got the submissions in the first. I don't know. Life One enjoyed Vaughan Lee's striking. I don't remember that kind of striking from Cage Gladiators at all, so I have no idea where he learnt to do that. Unfortunately, I think it was mainly Dillashaw's more experience, because... although at one point Dillashaw slipped, Vaughan was too slow to capitalise on that. Now, when he was in the midst of, one of his very clever sort of kicks or whatever it was, Dillashaw saw the opportunity, and that was the start of the end. There was a tremendous sort of takedown from that. And then it just went horribly wrong. To give him his due, Vaughan did get back to his feet prior to the sort of choke submission. They're saying it was some sort of neck crank rather than a choke, but it looked the same to me. So there we are. A little bit disappointed because I was actually enjoying that fight. That was one of the fights I enjoyed the most, and not just because it was going his way until that happened. So it's quite interesting. I went out on a limb and picked Weidman, and said to myself that I wasn't going to back the other major underdog on the card. And this was Craig, somebody or other. Oh no, Andrew Craig, that's it. And the reason I wasn't going to do that was because I thought I'd made sort of one, possible boob already. Well, I could have done with picking him, because he did win by knockout. Now, I wonder whether that had something to do with Natal sort of slowing down in the second. There was a lot of exchanges on the ground, which, Andrew Craig was not doing very well at all, standing or on the ground, all the way through the first and for most of the second. And I just wonder if Natal had expended a lot of energy, because by the time they were into the closing minute of the last round, the second round, the last round of the fight, they were both a lot slower, particularly Natal. Now, he caught him with some sort of head kick, I think, and that was the end of that. It was about 10 seconds before the end of the fight. I don't know. I don't know. I am going to. I was thinking, shall I give that? Shall I make him man of the card? But I just think that it might have been, I don't want to say luck, because I'm sure skill was involved, but I think that it was something that he wouldn't be able to repeat based on his performance in that. And of course, well done to Rafael Asankeo, who managed to win. He won the first round, and the second round he got a nice TKO finish. And I have to say, it's that sort of finish versus the finish that that I spoke about before with Andrew Craig that sort of is the difference in my mind. One of them is definitely, I can understand the sort of single strikes if it's a counter striker, but that wasn't what Daniel Craig was doing. Sorry, Daniel Craig? Whatever his name is, Andrew Craig, whatever. It wasn't what he was doing, and that's why I sort of not doubt the legitimacy, but I doubt whether he can repeat that sort of thing against that level calibre. Whereas when you see the sort of fight between and the TKO between Asankeo and Tamura, was it Tamura? Yes, Tamura. Then that's a little bit more like you can't really dispute that. That's talent. The main event did not disappoint. Weidman really threw himself into his work, and I mean that in a quite literal sense, actually. His takedowns were more of a case of just throwing oneself at one's opponent and literally sort of taking them down. It was a little bit like a tree fall or something like that, except it was more of a pounce, I suppose. It wasn't sort of a slow. It was more like a sort of a pounce. And he did very well during the first round to keep it on the ground. I did have a feeling that he could and possibly should have finished it in the first. I think that he kept jumping from submission to submission to submission. I think, had he chosen to stay with one, he would have probably got a submission finish there. Now, into the second round, it was quite interesting because neither of them particularly wanted to engage on their feet. I mean, if Munoz was so much better on his feet, how come in the second he was not quick to, attack? because it's rather like, you know, they will paw each other, and then when you least expect it, it's like Weidman just basically gets tired of it and just drops his hand and then springs, like boing, like a tiger. It's very strange. He got a TKO stoppage, and let's be honest with ourselves, it was a little bit of a late stoppage. Mark Munoz was obviously out some time before the call was made, because well, he was starting to sort of bleed all over the place halfway through the sort of hammer fists sort of thing to the side of his head. Which reminds me, what on earth is going on with the back of Mark Munoz's head? I spent the time they were sort of coming in trying to decide if he'd hurt himself and had sort of some sort of surgery, or if it was just some sort of jazzy back of the hair sort of haircut design. I couldn't make up my mind, to be honest. So I'm going to give this one instead to Weidman, obviously, because he was very, very impressive, and yes, I do hope that with a fight or two more that he can win, that he will possibly go forward to challenge Anderson Silva. Who knows, perhaps I shall be able to go out on a limb and support him there as well. So yeah, having probably offended everybody, that is my recap video.